In this video, I'm going to show you how you can look up academic journals and reference them correctly in Microsoft Word using a reference builder. So when you have done your results and analysed your data, you are expected to type up a report that looks a little bit like what I'm showing you on the screen. Part of that is writing an evaluation where you compare your experimental value to the actual value of Planck's constant that scientists found. So you can see that I've got some examples of values that I've found previously. And there's tiny numbers next to them to show exactly where I found them. These are called citations. So citations are basically me telling the reader exactly where I found a piece of information, which is a really important skill in science. So if you look at this first value here for Planck's constant given to many significant figures, I have written a little 2 in brackets and a little 3 in brackets. Because there's 2 references or 2 citations here, what I mean by that is the value that I've quoted here, I actually found that same value in 2 different places. And if I scroll down to my references, I found that value in reference number 2 and reference number 3. So reference number 2 refers to a website, Encyclopedia Britannica, and reference number 3 refers to an academic paper. It looks a little bit complicated, but I'll just explain what the reference shows. You have the last name of the author and their first initials, and then a comma to indicate that there are more authors. And again, you've got their last name and their first initials. This continues until you get to this part here, which is quite long, but it is the title of the academic paper. This is the name of the journal where this paper was published. This refers to the date that the journal was published, and this refers to the issue and volume number that the journal was published. This gives the reader enough information to find the exact academic journal that I got the same information from. So let's look at how we can research this. The best website to use to find academic papers for free is scholar.google.com. Now, what I can type in is something called Planck's constant value. If I open one of these papers, and I'll explain what all of these links mean in a moment, but if I open one of these papers, for example, this one over here, the second result, I can read the abstract of the paper. The abstract is just a shortened version of what is in the paper. This is not what I want to see, so maybe we'll try a different one. Okay, we'll try the top result here. So the top result over here, if I click not on the actual title of the paper, right next to it there is a link and it says PDF in brackets. If I click on the actual title of the paper, usually it takes me to the official website where the paper is also published, but I normally have to pay to access it. Let's click on it and see. So sometimes what happens is I only have access to what is called the abstract, which is a summary of what the paper is looking for. And then I have to either log in, usually with a university login email address and password, or I'll have to pay a lot of money to rent the article. So that's why Google is quite handy, where if you go back to the search page, there is a link to see a free PDF version of it online. And normally I should be able to open it in the browser. Now, if I scroll down to the abstract, it tells me a few things. It tells me that there is already a value for Planck's constant. And if I actually skim read this abstract actually tells me that these scientists have not found Planck's constant. So they've just used a value for Planck's constant, which was already there, and they've just described how Planck's constant was found. I mean, it's in the title of the paper, History and Progress on Accurate Measurements. So this might not exactly tell me what Planck's constant value I want to find. So we can go back to my search results. What's really handy is if I scroll down a little bit, it shows me some related searches. Now, this one that you can see, determination of the Planck constant, well, that's actually the same experiment that I'm doing. I'm trying to find out the Planck's constant. So if I click on that, it suggests some other papers I can look at instead. And again, if you click on the main title of the paper, it will take you to the academic journal where the paper was published, but unfortunately I have to either pay $29.95 to get the article as a PDF, or I have to log in via a university password. I can read the abstract, that's about as far as I can go. So unfortunately, you are limited until you're doing university level research, you are limited to whatever things you can find for free online. So if I look at the second one, the title looks quite promising, Determination of the Planck's Constant with METAS Watt balance. And next to it, you can see that there is a PDF that I can access online. There's a few other things to note here. So the first thing to note is there is a number here. It says cited by 126. That's very useful. That tells us that 126 other scientists who've written papers have also referenced this exact article, which I'm about to look at. There's also a button here that says cite. We'll come back to that in a moment. So let's open the PDF version and let's have a look at the abstract. So the abstract should tell us a little bit about what the practical is or what the experiment was. And if they have done research on determining the Planck's constant, which is what this article describes, then usually the scientists will include their results in the abstract. So here they've given a value for Planck's constant with the uncertainty as well. And they've also just summarized that it differs from some other values that have been found. I don't actually need to read the rest of the 10-page document. So you can see they go into a lot of data, a lot of information about the experiment that they use in order to calculate Planck's constant, their results, their uncertainties, acknowledgements, for example, thanking which universities or groups that they used equipment from, more diagrams. So you can see this is quite a technical document for scientists. And you'll also notice they have lots of references as well. So this is all the research that they have done and all the academic papers that they have used in their journal, in their article. So thankfully, we don't need to go through the entire paper, especially not at A level. So we're going to go to just this value, and I'm actually going to copy the value straight up in joule seconds. And then I'm going to go into my Word document where I already have a couple of values for Planck's constant, and I'm just going to paste those values. Okay, so the value shows up like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make sure that I've got the correct subscript. In Microsoft Word, subscripts are a lot easier. In the Home tab, there is usually an X with a little 2 at the bottom or an X with a little 2 at the top. So I'm going to turn that into a superscript. Now this is the 5th value of Planck's constant that I found. So what I'm going to do is I go in order with my citations. So 2, 3, 4, and this is the 5th one that appears. Now the standard is to also put our citations in superscript. So I'm going to use the same button again up here to make it superscript. There we go. Just beware that sometimes when you try to type things after the superscript, it also appears as a superscript. So you may need to click on the X to the X squared button again in order to make it normal font. If I want, I can also include my uncertainty. So I can insert a symbol, and hopefully this is in my recently used. I can do the plus minus symbol, go back to my academic paper, and this was the uncertainty. So I'm going to include that as well. I'll just repaste that. When you paste, sometimes the font looks quite messy. So if you click on this control option and click on this option, which is to paste the text only, it should usually erase any font differences, which I can't manage to do right now, but it should work usually. And again, let's have it in superscript to show our reader the uncertainty. Okay, so this is reference number 5. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to where all of my references are, and I'm going to write number 5 in brackets. I don't need to do a superscript for this part of my text. Now I'm going to reference my text. There's 2 ways to do the referencing. The first is if you go back to Google Scholar, the results page, this was the paper I used. So if you remember, I showed you there was a button that says cite. Google Scholar is quite helpful because if you click on it, click on the cite button, it actually gives you lots of different ways to cite your reference. So Vancouver, which is the reference system we're going to be using, appears at the bottom. So I can just copy it and I can paste it into my Word document like this. So that's done. I'm going to show you an alternative way to do this. So I'll keep the paper open in another tab so you can see it. Right, another way to do this is to just Google Vancouver Reference Maker or Vancouver Reference Builder. MyBib is usually the website I recommend. It's the first one that usually shows up. And it looks a little bit like this. Now we are quoting an academic journal. So we're going to go to Journal, and you have to put in the title of the journal. So the title of the journal is Determination of the Planck's Constant with the METAS Watt balance. So I'm going to copy that and paste that title into the journal section of mybib.com. So you can see that it comes up with the exact title and a couple of other similar looking papers with similar titles, or some not so similar titles. So this is the one we want, and you can also double check. You can have a look at the author names and have a look at the author names in the original paper right here. And you can see, yes, they seem to match up. So this is the correct paper. So if you click on it, Vancouver Reference Maker will show you the format for the reference in the same way that Google shows you. So what you can do is you can either click copy to clipboard, or you can highlight it and press Ctrl+C. If you do click copy to keyboard automatically, there is sometimes an issue where Vancouver Reference Maker always puts a number 1 in front of it, whereas if you remember, this was reference number 5. So you just need to be careful with that. And you can see that the reference looks more or less the same, whether or not you use Google Citation or whether you use Vancouver Reference Maker. The only difference is this capitalization of the journal that it comes from. And that is how you reference an academic paper and look for academic papers using Google Scholar.